You're in a doorway that used to be yours. The wood is split, the hinge screams, and the air outside tastes like ash. You step back, clutching the last thing you still control, your breath, because if you make a sound, they'll know you're here. Boots pass the threshold. Not a rush, not a frenzy. A calm, practiced entry, like men stepping into a storehouse they've inventoried before. You hear a child shift somewhere behind you and you want to turn, to warn him, to cover his mouth with your hand, but your body won't move fast enough. A voice speaks a language you don't understand. Another voice answers. And then, without raising their volume, they begin sorting the room. Sorting you. Before we go deeper, tell me where you're watching from. Honestly, it still amazes me that a story this old can reach living rooms across the entire world. When people imagine Conquest, they picture chaos, fire, looting, screaming crowds, a city collapsing in one long, violent night. But the Roman Empire, the machine behind the marble temples and the triumphal arches, often did something worse than chaos. It brought paperwork. It brought procedure. It brought a cold kind of calm that only exists when violence has become routine. The title of this story, The Fate of 25,000 Women After Conquest, isn't just a number meant to shock you. It's a clue to something Rome perfected, a hidden system that turned mass suffering into a managed outcome. Rome didn't simply win wars, it processed the defeated. And in that processing, women became the most contested, most controlled, and most carefully redistributed part of the spoils. We can't follow every one of those 25,000 lives. History rarely gives the defeated their full names back. But we can do something else. We can follow the pattern. We can follow the sound of the system as it clicks into place. First at the moment a city falls, then in the squares where survivors are gathered, then along the roads and harbors and markets that swallow people whole. And we can follow two human anchors through it. One captured woman whose identity is stripped down layer by layer, and one Roman functionary, an officer with clean hands, whose job is to make sure the suffering stays profitable, legal, and efficient. Because that's the paradox at the heart of this story. How can a civilization worship law, order, and citizenship, and build an economy that depends on erasing other human beings with methodical precision? Her name, in her own language, is Maris. That isn't the name Rome will use, and it isn't the name that will survive in any archive. It's simply the sound her mother used when she was small, the syllables that meant home. The morning the gates give way, Maris is not in armor. She is not on a wall. She is in a back room, behind a curtain she once believed was privacy, listening to a city's last hours. When the shouting finally reaches her street, it's strange what she notices. Not the cries, not even the clash of metal. It's the rhythm, the same cadence of footsteps returning again and again, squads moving in coordinated arcs, the way a net tightens. Someone pounds on a neighbor's door, and the pounding stops abruptly, like a task completed. She hears glass break, then a silence, then a low murmur in a tongue she can't speak, then the sound of something dragged along stone. Her husband left days ago with other men, carrying a spear that looked too light for what was coming. He promised he would return, because promises are what people make when they're trying to hold the world together with words. Now Maris doesn't even let herself imagine him alive. Imagining costs too much. She tells her younger brother, 16, tall, still half a child, to hide in the storage pit beneath the floorboards. "If you hear me scream," she whispers, "you do not come out." The boy's eyes flare with shame, the shame of a young man ordered to survive while others face the knife. But he nods. He disappears into darkness that smells like grain and damp clay. Then the door gives way. 3 men enter. They don't shout triumph, they don't laugh. Their discipline is the most terrifying thing in the room. One moves to the hearth, checking behind jars, flipping lids. Another stands at the threshold like a guard at a checkpoint. The third looks at Maris and tilts his head, as if evaluating a horse's gait. He doesn't need to speak to her to communicate what she has become. A thing to be classified. Maris's hands rise in a useless gesture. "Please, wait, don't," and the man's palm cracks across her forearm, not hard enough to break it, just enough to train her body into compliance. Somewhere under the floor, the boy shifts. A board creaks. The Roman at the hearth freezes instantly, like a dog hearing a whistle. He turns, walks toward the center of the room, kneels, and presses his ear to the boards. Maris tries to throw herself across him, to distract, to lie, to do anything. The soldier catches her by the hair without looking, yanks her back, and the pain is bright and immediate. A short command is spoken. The guard at the door steps in, grips Maris's wrists behind her, and holds her still. The hearth soldier pries up a board, another, and then the darkness beneath gives up its secret. The boy's face appears for 1 second, eyes wide, lips forming her name, before hands drag him upward like a sack of grain. He fights, he kicks, he claws. The Romans do not react emotionally. They react procedurally, a knee to the ribs, an elbow to the jaw. The struggle ends the way a candle ends. Sudden, quiet. Smoke. Outside, the street is filling with bodies. Not only corpses. Living bodies herded into clusters like livestock. Maris sees women she recognizes and can't recognize them at all because they're no longer wearing the expressions of daily life. They are wearing the same face, shock held in place by fear. What happens next is not random. It feels random to those who are captured. But it isn't. The Romans are already separating groups. Men and boys pulled one way, women and children another. Old people shoved aside, the wounded dragged to the edges. There are gestures and signals between officers. Short, sharp, practiced. Someone is counting. Someone is writing. Maris is pushed into a line of women that snakes toward the city square. The sun is high, and the square, once a place for markets and arguments and gossip, has turned into something else entirely. A station, a processing point, a human funnel. Near the center, a table has been set up. Wax tablets, styluses, a small stack of tags, thin strips of wood or lead that can be tied to a wrist. 2 scribes sit with their heads down, writing fast, their hands stained dark. An officer stands beside them, not armored like a soldier at the wall, but dressed like a man who expects order. He scans the line, and in his gaze, Maris feels herself shrink. He does not ask her name. He doesn't need it. He is not collecting stories. He is collecting categories. A woman ahead of Maris tries to speak, pleading, bargaining, perhaps simply asking what is happening, and the officer lifts his hand without looking, and a soldier strikes her. The message is immediate and cruelly efficient. Voices are delays. When Maris reaches the table, the officer steps close and examines her the way a merchant examines cloth. He presses 2 fingers beneath her chin, tilts her face left and right, checks her teeth like she's an animal. His other hand squeezes her upper arm, not intimate, not lewd, just measuring muscle. He looks down at her hips. He makes a mark on the wax. He speaks to the scribe. The scribe scratches something down. A tag is tied to Maris's wrist. It carries a symbol and a number. Her name becomes irrelevant in a single motion. And here is the first hidden rule of Rome's system, the one that turns conquest from slaughter into infrastructure. Rome does not treat captives as a single category. Rome treats them as a supply chain. Every body has a potential use, and the use determines the cruelty that follows. Men of fighting age? Risk, future rebels. In many conquests, they are killed quickly or sold into labor so brutal it functions like a slow execution. Boys on the edge of manhood, either killed to prevent revenge or broken early in mines, quarries, and galleys. Children too young to be threats? They are malleable. They can be raised into someone else's language. And women? Women are considered valuable in multiple ways at once, which means they are controlled more tightly, moved more carefully, and, this is the part people flinch from, kept alive on purpose, not out of mercy, out of utility. Maris is moved from the square at sundown, with hundreds of other women. They march under guard, past buildings that are still smoking. The city's familiar corners are now unrecognizable, not because the stones have changed, but because her relationship to them has. She is no longer someone who lives here. She is someone being removed. They sleep in an enclosed yard that night, shoulder to shoulder, the air heavy with sweat and whispering. Not everyone cries. Some are beyond tears already. A girl, maybe 13, keeps repeating a word that sounds like prayer. An older woman stares at the sky as if trying to memorize it, as if she suspects she will never see the same stars again. Before dawn, they are forced up. A new group arrives, more captives from the outer districts. The line swells, the numbers grow, and the Roman officer returns with the same calm face and the same wax tablet, as though he is clocking into work. This is where the second curiosity spike hits, because the system doesn't end with capture. It begins there. The true machinery is what happens after the sorting, how Rome turns thousands of lives into routes, schedules, sales, and assignments. The women are marched toward the harbor. Along the road, Maris sees carts stacked with household goods, pots, textiles, furniture, plunder transformed into inventory. She sees chained columns of men, neck to neck, guarded more aggressively than the women, because men are expected to fight even after losing everything. She sees, on the roadside, bodies left unburied, because burial is for citizens, and Conquest strips citizenship as easily as it strips clothing. At the harbor, ships wait like open mouths, not warships, not sleek and proud, but transport vessels, broad-bellied, built to carry heavy loads. The smell hits first: brine, tar, fish, sweat, and the sharp metallic tang of fear. The women are herded up planks and down into holds. Below deck, there is barely room to sit. They are packed in rows. The air is stale, thick, and already warm, though the sun has barely risen. Ropes bind wrists, sometimes ankles. Not because Rome expects all of them to escape, but because control is cheaper than trust. Maris tries to keep her breathing steady. She presses her shoulder against a beam. A woman beside her whispers, "Where are they taking us?" Another answers, "Anywhere but home." Days blend. The ship creaks and pitches. Water is rationed. Food is hard and dry. Sickness spreads in the corners where people cannot move away from one another. When someone vomits, there is nowhere for it to go except onto the wood and onto other bodies. When someone begins to fever, there is no healer, only the cold arithmetic of transport. Sick cargo reduces profit. At night, the hold becomes a chorus of quiet sounds, prayers, whimpers, the occasional stifled sob. But the most common sound is silence, because silence is what people adopt when they realize their voices cannot change the shape of their fate. Maris begins to understand the deeper cruelty. Rome is not only taking her body, Rome is taking time, taking the days and weeks in which her mind might break itself, trying to return to a world that is gone. The sea is a tool for that. Distance is a weapon. When the ship finally reaches a major port, the women are led out blinking into sunlight like animals dragged from a cave. Maris's legs shake as she steps onto land. She has lost weight. Her wrists are raw where the rope bit, but she is alive. And in this system, alive does not mean saved. Alive means still usable. They are taken to holding pens near the market, enclosures made of wood and rope, watched by guards who look bored. Dealers move among the captives, not with swords, but with ledgers. They talk to one another in quick Latin, using words that sound like numbers and measurements. They point, they nod, they laugh occasionally, but not at jokes, at bargains. Maris sees the preparation begin. Not for healing, for sale. Women are washed, sometimes roughly, sometimes with perfumed oil rubbed into their skin to make them look healthier. Hair is combed or cut. A tunic is thrown over them, simple, identical, a uniform of ownership. If a captive clings to jewelry, it is removed. If she tries to cover herself, her hands are slapped away. Modesty is not recognized as a right. It is treated as inconvenience. A dealer steps up to Maris and turns her slightly, checking the curve of her back, the firmness of her arms. He lifts her chin. He speaks to an assistant who writes something down. Maris doesn't understand the words, but she understands the meaning. He is describing her as an object to be purchased. She hears other women questioned like livestock. Where is she from? Can she work in a household? Is she trained? Has she borne children? The buyers want guarantees the way any investor wants guarantees. A woman with skills might fetch a higher price. A woman who looks strong might be sent to labor. A woman who looks young might be bought for reasons no one says out loud in public, but everyone understands. Maris's number is called. She is pushed onto a raised platform. The market noise surges around her, shouts, bargaining, coins clinking, sandals scraping stone. The crowd below is mostly men, merchants, landowners, overseers, people who have money and want bodies to turn into more money. A man in a clean toga watches with narrowed eyes. Another, wearing rings, leans to speak with a friend. Someone laughs. Someone spits. The dealer begins his patter, rapid Latin, pointing out Maris's features as if she isn't standing right there listening, understanding only the tone. The bidding starts. Maris doesn't know the numbers, but she recognizes the rhythm of rising stakes, the way the crowd responds as if watching entertainment. When the price settles, the dealer slaps his hand down, announcing the sale. A receipt is exchanged, a small piece of material that represents a human life converted into property. Maris is pulled off the platform by the wrist. She stumbles. A new hand holds her rope, a new owner. Here is the third curiosity spike, the one that reveals the darkest contradiction of all. Rome's violence is not always lawless. It is often legal. The purchase is not a kidnapping in Roman eyes. It is a transaction protected by courts, contracts, and social norms. A woman who was a free person days ago can become, in the logic of empire, an object with a price tag, and the entire city around her can treat that as ordinary commerce. Her new owner is not an obvious monster. That's what makes it worse. He looks like a man completing an errand. His cruelty is not in theatrics. It is in indifference. Maris is taken to a household outside the city center, somewhere quieter. She walks through a gate and sees a courtyard with a fountain. The water's sound feels insulting, like the house is allowed to remain peaceful while her world has ended. Servants look at her with quick, assessing glances. Some are enslaved too, but older, adapted, trained. They don't meet her eyes for long. Eye contact can be dangerous when every interaction is monitored by power. That first night, the overseer gives her a new name, not one that belongs to her, but one that fits the household's order, secunda tertia. A label, not an identity. The rules are explained in clipped phrases she barely understands, but the message is clear. Obedience prevents punishment. Resistance invites it. The erasure doesn't arrive all at once. It happens slowly. First, language. She is discouraged from speaking her native tongue, sometimes with mockery, sometimes with isolation. If she cannot speak, she cannot conspire. If she cannot conspire, she becomes manageable. Then, memory. She is told not to speak of home, not to sing old songs. At night, she whispers her real name into her sleeve, repeating the names of her family so they don't dissolve. But exhaustion is relentless. Work begins at dawn. Food is thin. Sleep is broken. Her body adapts faster than her mind. Then, identity. Her hair is cut, her clothes standardized, her gaze trained downward. She learns Roman routines, Roman gods, Roman sounds, until they feel like the only world that exists. This was Rome's secret. You didn't need to kill everyone to conquer them. You only needed to make their former selves unreachable. Weeks pass, then months. To the household, she is not a tragedy. She is supply.